The Last of Us Part 2 spoilers without context.
Please get up!
When you kill off the beloved protagonist of the first game in a disrespectful way and decide to replace his and Ellie's story with a new set of characters in a poorly written story and have the audacity to say that you're honoring Joel and Ellie's story.
Absolute garbage. Not only because of SJW, but because of lack of interesting plot. You killed Joel, but emotions I felt wasn't the same as emotions in previous chapter. It's not a sequel. Just a fun-made gluck with vibe.
Up under this pressure, will he be able to—
Stop watching the video game channel, you big bunch of losers! You're wasting your lives! Get a job, kiss a girl, do something! No offense.
The Last of Us 2 was certainly a controversial game. I would issue a spoiler warning, but the game itself was spoiled when details of the game's plot leaked prior to its summer release in 2020. I would have liked to talk about the game upon release, but I've only recently started uploading semi-consistently to YouTube, and talking about The Last of Us 2 back then, well... it paints a huge target on your back. The people who didn't like it really hated the game, and those who did enjoy the game get defensive towards anyone who didn't enjoy it. But now it's 2 years later, and things have calmed down somewhat. HBO is filming a series adaptation for the first game, and a from-the-grounds-up remake of the first game is imminent. All is relatively well in the fandom. Nature is healing. Naughty Dog is even fixing the cover art for The Last of Us remake by making Ellie more prominent now. It's nice to see because people in the industry didn't think the game would sell well with Ellie being more prominent on the cover when the game initially came out. There are still people dying on their respective hills, but just ignore them, they just want attention at this point. Which is why I feel that I can safely say that I actually loved The Last of Us Part 2. You have heard me correctly, I liked The Last of Us Part 2. Sue me. However, I won't ignore the controversial nature of the game itself. It is indisputable that the game itself ruffled some feathers within the community upon release. The handling of it may have been its biggest and most recent controversy within The Last of Us's history, so big in fact that it shadowed the man's attention like a big elephant in the room. But there have been other things that sparked fandom-wide discussion, and not so surprisingly, it always has to do with Ellie's sexuality, which is our topic of today's conversation. For those who clicked on the video because lesbians, and don't know who Ellie is, a light summary of the first game seems in order. Ellie is a character from the Last of Us series of video games. The series takes place after a fungal infection spreads across the world, effectively causing a zombie apocalypse. Ellie in the first game is a 14-year-old girl, and is the only known case of someone managing to develop immunity from the disease. The story truly begins when she and the smuggler, Joel, begin their journey across the United States to get Ellie to the right people to create a cure. When they do manage to find these people, it is revealed that in order to create a vaccine, Ellie would have to die. Joel lost his daughter at the very beginning of the pandemic and forgone feelings in order to survive. He grew to become a slightly better person because of Ellie and bonded with her over the course of their journey. Of course he doesn't want her to die, and then goes on an admittedly selfish rescue mission, killing the last people on Earth who could possibly create a vaccine. Could they have created the vaccine? Could they have even distributed it on a wide enough scale to save the world? The world will unfortunately never get that chance because Joel stole that choice from everyone. His actions remind me and closely mirror that of Brad Armstrong from Lisa the Painful. Lisa the Painful is one of many Earthbound, Yume Nikki inspired RPG maker games, but a unique one. It even predates Undertale by 1 year, so those comparisons are unwarranted. Anyway, Brad was a character who underwent abuse from his father and bullying from his peers. The death of his sister changed who he was to his core, as he felt he failed her. One day you're minding your business and boom, apocalypse. As the nature of the world changed around him, he became a worse person, killing those who got in his way and abusing substances in order to numb the pain. And then one day, and stop me if you've heard this before, he finds a little girl in the apocalypse. A baby girl in a world devoid of women. And instead of sharing a miracle with the world, Brad, decides to keep the child to themselves, falsely believing the child to be their second chance to do things right, even if it means damning the world. But while Buddy, Brad's adoptive daughter, was able to pull away from him after that mask comes off, Joel's mask off moment wasn't so obvious. He keeps his deed from Ellie, never revealing to her what actually happened at the hospital as they make their way to a human settlement, and their relationship becomes strained as a result. Ellie was asleep during the ordeal and remains unaware as to why no vaccine was created. no longer trusting Joel. Ellie believed that meeting the Fireflies and creating a vaccine was her life's purpose. As she stated herself, everyone in her life had either left her or died. She never got to learn who her mom was, and lost her best friend when they both became infected. She eventually finds out the truth after going back to the hospital and finding audio recordings of the event. This causes her and Joel's relationship to become almost completely severed. Ellie was given hope that her life would have meant something if she could some way, somehow, find a cure or a vaccine from her immunity, and now her life's goal is void, meaning all the people that died for her, Tess, the brothers, and Riley, died for nothing. This leads into the controversy I brought up earlier. The Last of Us only ever received one DLC story that took place during and before the main campaign. The Last of Us Left Behind came out in 2014, a whole year after the first game came out. While the mission that takes place in the middle of the main campaign adds little to nothing to the main plot, the prologue introduces us to Ellie 3 weeks before the main game begins, when she first got infected. She was minding her own business one day in the government building, shelter, school, when her estranged best friend Riley shows up. She reveals that she was absent for some time as she was joining the aforementioned Fireflies. Riley, despite being told not to contact Ellie, decided to come and see her anyway as she had some free time. Riley takes Ellie to an old abandoned mall where they had been before, except now, as Riley has discovered, has working power, and the two explore the ruins of the mall, going through Halloween stores, telling each other lame puns.
Boiled egg in the morning is really hard to beat.
That's funny.
That is funny.
I like that one.
And riding the merry-go-round. They have a good time, but Ellie begins to get reflective. Riley had left her, and she still hasn't let go of it despite Riley's best efforts.
When have you ever cared about what I think? We were good. We were better than good, and then you told me to fuck off, and then you just up and vanish.
Ellie never had anyone in her life actually stay in her life, so of course her best friend abandoning her hurts her. And to make matters worse, the main reason Riley came back was because the Fireflies wanted her to be stationed in another town, far away from Ellie. And she leaves tomorrow. The girls would probably never get to see each other again. When Ellie asks why Riley can see her, she simply says she doesn't know. And Ellie, as a result, tries to push her away, telling her just to go. But Riley isn't leaving her again. She came halfway across town to see Ellie, and if she's caught as a Firefly, she's dead. She's taken a big risk just to be with Ellie for one night, and she doesn't know why. Electing to start over again, they have a water gun fight which repairs the mood. Once it's over, in what seems to be a bid to be supportive and to make sure she doesn't get hurt again, Ellie tells Riley that she should go with the Fireflies, since it's all she ever wanted. Instead of accepting the answer, Riley plays some music, and the girls begin to dance together on top of tables, without a care in the world, like nothing's wrong. This is when Ellie gets her true answer.
Don't go. Sorry.
The girls begin to plan their next course of action when their rather intimate reconciliation is unfortunately cut short, interrupted by a wave of clickers coming after them, drawn by the loud music. Despite their best efforts to escape, both are bitten and affected with the virus. Most everyone turns within hours, and the girls are freaking out. Riley tells them that now they only have two options: to take matters into their own hands and leave the world on their own terms, or just to lose their minds and become clickers together. They elect to turn into ravenous monsters together, but the tragedy is that while Riley would turn, Ellie would not, and their sapphic relationship would end in tragedy. The portrayal of Ellie and Riley's relationship is extremely emblematic of teenage romance and first love, reminding me of how Reggie was written in 12 Forever. Just as Reggie wasn't able to understand why she wanted to be around Kennelly, and why she did such weird things around her, both the girls here didn't really understand their feelings for one another, so much so that Riley couldn't even explain why she traveled halfway across a city full of soldiers gunning for her head, just to be with Ellie again. They came pretty close to figuring out what they were to each other, but their time together was cut short, giving Ellie another loved one to mourn for, and another reason as to why she believes she had to be the one to aid in creating a cure for all those she lost. Even while everyone with a working brain could see that these girls held fondness for each other, it was actually heavily debated at the time, and why I refer to it as a controversy. People weren't convinced that Ellie was gay, or at the least that she was sapphic, and I'm not even kidding. I remember the debate so heavily despite the fact that I was like 13 at the time. I am glad they ended up making Ellie a lesbian. Men were mad that a fictional character was no longer available to them. So the fact that Ellie is only interested in women is important and must be highlighted. It was extremely upsetting that people were so ready to deny the fact that Ellie was in fact attracted to Riley, stating that her lesbianism was just a phase or confusion, or not even inherently romantic. The debate eventually caused Neil Druckmann, director of The Last of Us, to speak out in an interview. He commented on his annoyance over the debate, stating that if Riley were a boy, the issue would not be subject to scrutinous debate. No one would be saying that they're just confused, riding off the high that is the end of the world, or something like that. This finally ended the controversial debate and confirmed Ellie as a lesbian, and the fandom rejoiced. So, when development for the second game was announced with a teaser trailer at E3, rest in peace E3, we hardly knew ye, the question on everyone's mind was whether or not we would get to see Ellie in a relationship. The teaser was framed in a way that made the game seem like a tale of revenge. Joel was teased in the trailer, reassuring fans that he would still be alive and present, so fans assumed this person would be Ellie's girlfriend, the person that she was avenging, that is. This would be proven untrue when spoilers for the game came out, as well as the final release, but it seems Naughty Dog went along with it for marketing purposes. And I'm going to go over the reasons why people believed in the marketing. It's called visual dialogue, and how you frame a scene will communicate certain ideas to the viewer. It's like when the character asks where X character is, and then you cut to where that character is without saying it. You've communicated to me where that person is without verbal dialogue. Amazing. Using this tactic, it seemed Naughty Dog was intending to misdirect and annoy people into believing the narrative. The next teaser that came out gave more credibility to the dead girlfriend revenge narrative that we would see at E3, and again at E3 2018. We would get to see more story beats as well as gameplay. Fun fact, for the Sony segment of E3 that year, the audience was brought to multiple different sets and each set matched the setting of the game that would be revealed. For The Last of Us 2, it would take place in a church with lighting hung around them, easing them further into the world. I choose to highlight this part due to the effort game studios and developers went into making their show the best as can be at that E3. E3 hasn't been doing so well up to that point, and then next year Sony would announce that they would decline their invitation to E3 in favor of their state of play and style announcements, an idea they took from Nintendo Directs. And then COVID-19 would ravage the following year, causing more game studios to pull out, and then it would be outright cancelled the following year. While yes, it was on the decline, it would be a shame if E3 were to disappear from the gaming space altogether. This would mean less announcements with the style and flair The Last of Us 2 and Ghost of Tsushima presented that year. Anyway, back to the main topic of the video. The gameplay trailer begins with a story segment. It seems like a party is going on and Ellie is standing alone, keeping her eyes on this girl, when her friend Jessie walks up to her. They talk for a bit about the girl and how Jessie and Dina, as she's named, will get back together soon. Dina then walks up to Jessie and then leads Ellie to the dance floor. They get close and personal and Dina asks,
"How bad do I smell?" "Like a hot pile of garbage."
Oh, okay.
Oh, how about that?
Gross.
You love it. Every guy in this room is staring at you right now. Maybe they're staring at you. Or not. Maybe they're jealous of you. I'm just a girl, not a threat. Oh, Ellie. I think they should be terrified of you.
and then boom, we're in the gameplay segment, and we see how terrifying Ellie can be when pushed to violence, laying waste to everyone in her way before we cut back to the party and Dina after kissing Ellie. The cut to Ellie killing people after kissing Dina seems to imply that she's fighting all these men for revenge, and who to avenge but her seemingly dead girlfriend. The next trailer release played heavily into this theory.
Tommy, I have to finish it.
Oh, for fuck's sake! Rip lesbians! Ugh!
What you're walking into.
What are you doing?
Bored! I don't.
Spotting this article that was worried about The Last of Us fridging Dina. For those that don't know what fridging is, it's basically when the girlfriend character of the main character dies for their development and to advance the plot, which usually leads them to going on a quest for revenge. It's called fridging because of the absurd nature writers tend to kill off girlfriend characters, like stuffing them to a fridge. The term was coined in the 90s by Gail Simone after the Green Lantern comic featuring Kyle Rayner as the Green Lantern featured his girlfriend getting stuffed into a fridge and later dying. And while DC didn't invent this trope, as there are countless prior examples of women being killed for the development of the plot, such as Gwen Stacy, it was disheartening to think that Naughty Dog, the pinnacle of Oscar-like storytelling in video games, would employ such a problematic trope. The women who are fridge are largely defined by their deaths and not by their lives, so to give Ellie a girlfriend, only to kill her off immediately, well, let's just say reactions weren't so positive. And lastly, a cinematic trailer released shortly before the game's launch shows Ellie singing a song in the background while evading her pursuers. She hides behind a car and readies her gun. Closing her eyes, the camera pans to her bracelet, and we cut to Ellie singing a campfire song, and the bracelet is implied to be Dina's, as she is wearing it in the flashback. We then cut back to Ellie, her gun in her hand, her eyes open after seemingly reaffirming her resolve and conviction in her revenge, and she aims her gun at the crowd. Fade to black, and the singing stops. You could see why someone with decent observation skills would believe that this was a story about revenge over your dead girlfriend, but again, that wasn't the case. At the very least, it led to Dina's big role in the plot. And looking here, we're finally talking about Ellie's lesbianism in The Last of Us Part 2. In a blink and you'll miss a flashback, you can look in Ellie's backpack to read her journal. In her journal, you'll learn that Ellie was dating a girl named Kat at the time, and this Kat girl is crazy about Ellie and open with everyone, holding her hand at the lakefront and droning on and on about her to her mom. This leads to Ellie wondering if she should tell Joel about her, as Joel hasn't the slightest clue about it, and as we would later learn, believes Ellie has a crush on Jesse because he has a really keen eye for this thing.
Not so keen with this one.
And I guess I'll discuss it now, as it takes place after the infamous kiss scene, but shortly after their kiss, they are threatened by some douche named Will. Rather than describe it, I'll play the clip. If you can't stomach homophobic slurs and genuinely triggering and tense air, please skip to the aforementioned time below.
Oh, just what this town needs. Another loudmouth dyke.
The fuck did you just say?
Ellie,
Hey!
Ellie, don't.
Get the hell out of here. Get your hands off me.
Hey!
Enough. Go on, you. Let's go for a walk.
What about them?
You worry about yourself.
Let's get you some fresh air.
You alright, kiddo?
What is wrong with you?
While we stand Joel for coming to Ellie's defense, the following scene is probably the most important in the game, so much so that you have to wait till the end of the game to see it. Without it, later scenes don't make as much sense, so for the sake of context, I will explain it now. After the ordeal, Ellie seemingly comes out to Joel, and while Ellie doesn't believe anything will come from the kiss, Joel believes Dina will be lucky to have her. Aww. This, however, isn't the heart of the matter, and Ellie outright states she should have died in the hospital, that her life would have mattered that way, as she still feels guilt over what could have been. But Joel stands firm in his decision, stating he would do it again if given the chance by God. But Ellie doesn't know if she can forgive him, which turns the conversation sorrowful. But then Ellie states something interesting, that while she doesn't believe she can forgive Joel, she would like to, and that she'll see him around, at which point the game would have begun in the perspective of Abby. Now, Abby is a new character to The Last of Us. In fact, she's the daughter of the surgeon who would have created the vaccine, had it not been for Joel. He damned the world, and Abby and her friends want some form of moral equilibrium, an eye for an eye. After managing to infiltrate the Jackson settlement, they corner Joel and his brother Tommy in their safe house. Abby begins to beat him to death while Ellie interrupts. They hold her down and she sees Joel pass right before her, and then she gets knocked out. Yes, this is a revenge story, but Ellie is trying to avenge Joel, and Dina joins her for her mission, as they got together since the events of the party. This is the most controversial aspect of the game. Players were looking forward to play a Western-style revenge story with Joel by Ellie's side. And as that wasn't the case, along with bad PR from Naughty Dog trying to say they want to make the players feel bad for killing in a game about killing, players' attitudes towards the game quickly soured. Having to play as Joel's killer doesn't help either. Some people even claim that this was an instance of the game fridging Joel, but that's not the case. Fridging usually leaves no room for reflection on the dead character and moves on rather quickly. But Ellie and Joel's relationship is at the heart of this game as it was in the original. Now, as we have established, everyone Ellie has ever loved died or left her. At the end of the day, she loved and cared for Joel, and now he's gone. Their relationship was strained after the events of the game prior, but it was almost completely severed when Ellie discovered the truth, that Joel killed the Fireflies and ended humanity's hope of salvation. Although she tried to, she was never able to forgive Joel, and since he's gone, she never will be able to mend their relationship. All she's left with is a bunch of confusing, happy, and sad, conflicted memories that she'll never be able to reconcile. I guess that's why the game decided to give us some Ellie and Joel moments through flashback, so that we could see from Ellie's perspective why she tried so hard to mend their relationship even though what Joel did was unforgivable. Sort of like in Inside Out, Now all her happy memories of Joel are influenced by what he did. She won't be able to remember the good times without remembering the bad times, and being sad and conflicted, and not knowing what to do. She can't move on, and this damage is at the heart of the game and influences Ellie's every action. She believes that if she can kill all those responsible, that she will be able to get some form of closure and heal and move on. But this isn't true because her sorrow stem from how Joel died and the fact that they never reconciled. Dina does what she can to love and support Ellie through their journey together, calming her down after taking out each and every person responsible for Joel's death until they get to Abby. After taking out her last 2 targets, Ellie comes to learn that one of them was pregnant. This causes what seems to be a panic attack in Ellie as she comes to wonder why she's doing what she's doing. Dina reveals herself to be pregnant after all, and Ellie doesn't want to harm innocent people. She's beginning to regret what she's done when Abby attacks, having followed Ellie after the attack. She easily bodies them both and was ready to kill Dina despite revealing she was also pregnant, but she grew as a person and doesn't want to look evil in front of Lev, a trans character she saved from an evil cult. Lev wanted to be part of the men of their cult and shaved his hair to do so, which was a major violation of their faith. He was going to be killed when Abby came across him on her journey to find out who's killing all her friends. She grows with Lev in a similar manner that Joel did with Ellie, except Abby grows not by pushing all her damage onto Lev, expecting him to be a second chance at something, but by simply being a better person. Killing Dina and Ellie would have been too easy, but she shows restraint in not doing so, and proves her growth to Lev, and they continue on as evil partners. While I don't really care too much for Abby, I don't hate her as vitriolically as the players who oppose this game does. I think her story is well-rounded, and if it had been executed properly, the players could have loved to love Abby, maybe. Having to play as her at the beginning of the game, and having killed Joel, definitely sours people to her. But I feel like if you were able to play Ellie's campaign, and then play Abby's campaign with the knowledge of what had happened in the game in Ellie's campaign, that would have done a lot better to, earn players over to Abby. Anyway, after the confrontation, Ellie and Dina retreat and begin life on the secluded farm. Dina gives birth to Jesse Jr., named after his father who died during the campaign, and is the best part of Ellie and Dina's relationship. It's always great to see couples who survive hardships and adversities settle down and live a happy, quiet life, which they do, until Ellie suffers a panic attack. She is still haunted by her past, by Joel's passing, by Abby. She hasn't gotten over it, and she fears in her head that she will be haunted by it forever. One day, Tommy, Joel's brother who joined you briefly on your trip for revenge, comes with you with a lead on Abby's whereabouts. He's been physically disabled since you last met, and his wife left him. Sad. As he is unable to finish the task, he hopes Ellie will, but Dina isn't so forthcoming on going on another suicide mission for revenge. That doesn't matter anymore, especially as they have Jesse Jr. to look after. They're living their best lives, and don't want to risk it. Ellie doesn't want to risk it. But eventually, she musters the courage to do so, believing she could get past all her trauma if she sees Abby die before her. She unfortunately decides to go despite Dina's wishes not to, and threats to leave her, to never see her again. This is what trauma does to someone. It changes them to their core, and it hurts those around them. I've talked about how relationships, even queer ones, can help people grow alongside their chosen partner. However, it's not always the case that meeting and being with the right person will help you grow. Dina has almost been the perfect partner. She's been supportive of Ellie's endeavors and helps calm her down after panic attacks. She even helped Ellie pursue her dream of settling down on a farm. But what Ellie needed was closure with the one person she trusted in the world. Closure on someone she hadn't forgiven but desperately wanted to. And he's dead. Ellie will never get that closure. And because she wasn't able to understand or communicate that importance to Dina, she loses that support system that was already so important to her. Dina went as far as she could, but risking her life, her son, the woman she loved, she couldn't do it all again. She can't risk her own growth. So after Ellie fails to get that closure and letting Abby go, returning to her farm, she returned to an empty home. And while she was finally able to grow somewhat from the endeavor, was it worth it? During Pride Month, I mainly want to talk about iconic queer characters and highlighting the love and joy within our community. And while Ellie's story is a tragedy, filled with violence, sorrow, and loneliness, Ellie's story is queer and varied. I wanted to highlight the wide spectrum of queer characters. I've talked about Boy Scouts, I've talked about bad boys, I've talked about growth with partners, and Ellie's story is indeed a story that deserves recognition, even if it isn't the happiest story. I hope we can see where she goes from here, if we get to see her story continue at all. And we shouldn't forget that the main character of a AAA adventure game, from a prominent studio of Sony Entertainment, is a gay as hell lesbian. That in and of itself rocks and is worth noting. Yeah, people agree that the graphics, music, accessibility, voice acting, art, gameplay, that tree over there, it's all good, but people will claim that the game was never good only because the story wasn't what they wanted. While it's certainly not what we would have expected, if you play the game and meet it where it is and earnestly play the game, You should be able to enjoy the game for what it is. You're not obligated to play it if Joel's death was that horrible to you. I stopped watching Charmed after they killed off my favorite Halliwell. But you shouldn't bash the game for going in a direction you don't agree with. Just don't play the game and let people who are willing to engage in it enjoy the game. Anyway, for The Last of Us content, we're getting a remake of the first game for PS5, as well as a HBO show, which wrapped up filming recently. It's supposed to come out sometime next year, so I'm happy to say we've got content coming for some time. In the meantime, check out all my other stuff if any of them catches your fancy. I basically talk about all my interests at any given time no matter what nonstop. I'll be here. Megalomaniac64, signing off.